I'm Tommy Scoville, and you're on the Love Boat. Don't try this at home, folks. I am a trained professional. Don't try this at home. Krista Melinda, good to see you. What's happening? Hello, Jane Aldrich. Joy Lee, good to see you. Glad that you are here. Today was one of those days, peeps. It really was. It was one of those days that was just a little bit more intense than the average. As most of you know, I spend some time these days working with some gentlemen who are in rehabilitation in a very unique rehabilitation facility like nothing I've ever seen. And it got me thinking kind of to where I'm at and how I got here. And I remembered certain days. Timothy Glass says, heroin is the devil's hope. He offers you in your time of despair, but love is what God offers in you to be delivered from the devil's prison. I'll tell you what, man, you want to talk about one of the most evil substances on planet Earth. Let's talk about heroin. I remember sitting in a truck and I was on my way to get dope. And every single law enforcement community in the entire state that I lived in, and a few federal agencies, including a helicopter, with a guy strapped in, standing on the strut with an automatic weapon. I'm not making this up. You would have thought I was Al Capone times 6. But they decided to raid us there on the side of the road. And I was sitting in the truck thinking to myself, how in hell did I get from the little town I grew up in Vermont to sitting here right now being raided by every single law enforcement agency in the state? One of those moments. You have a few of them in life. If you're a junkie, you might have a little bit more than the next guy. But it got me thinking. And the question becomes for a lot of people, how did we get here? And if you go back far enough, in 1803, Frederick Sertiner, a German pharmacist, synthesized morphine for the first time. This was the first person to take a plant, isolate an alkaloid from the plant, remove it, and turn it into a drug. It's never happened before. And he named it morphine after the Greek god of sleep, Morpheus, which would lead you to believe they had a pretty good idea what this was going to do in the human body. But the one thing that they seemed to not see coming was people getting addicted. Although it's really odd because opium had been widely used to treat people's pain for a millennium. But when you extracted just that alkaloid and turned it into something that you could put directly into someone's body in way more efficient ways, although it got a lot more efficient in the 1850s and 60s. Morphine in the Civil War. It was given to soldiers in huge quantities during the Civil War. Thousands developed what was called soldier's disease. The advent of the hypodermic needle didn't help. The ability to now take this stuff and put it underneath the skin made this a whole hell of a lot worse. And we got a smart group here, you got to admit. Bayer invented heroin to cure morphine addiction. Well, that was one of the reasons. It certainly got used for that a lot. It was first synthesized in London by C.R. Alder Wright. Diacetyl All they really did was add one diacetyl molecule to morphine. And it became, or one acetyl molecule to morphine. It became diacetyl morphine. Here's the crazy thing. No matter what you're addicted to, you hear me say all the time, people will come on and go, I've never done anything like that. I wouldn't do those street drugs. I take hydrocodone. It's heroin. I promise you. They're all heroin. What your brain does, no matter what you put in there, if you put in the gnarliest synthetic on planet Earth, which today would be nitazines, or it could be fentanyl or any of those, your body can't deal with any of that. It can't deal with any of that. The person that invented the hypodermic needle, his wife died of a overdose. Well, there is some truth to that rumor as well. And there were a lot of people whose wives being addicted to dope changed how everything happened in our world. But so it sat on a shelf for 20 years. They did nothing with heroin. It came from the word, by the way, you want to really just grit your teeth? You know why they called it heroin, Johnny Scoville? On account of the fact that it came from the word heroic. Yeah. They thought this would be a heroic painkiller, which is just lovely. The German company Bayer in 1898 markets heroin for the first time, and it sells it as a non-addictive substitute for morphine and as a cough suppressant. It was in everything. Don't BS yourself. It was in everything. Patent medicine came along, and snake oil salesmen, like the guy that you see in the movie The Outlaw Josie Wales. How is it on stains? Snake oil salesmen would roll into town and they would tell you that whether you had falling arches or your child was teething or your wife was having menstrual cramps or you hurt yourself trying to shoe a horse, there was a magic elixir. Laudanum probably got more ink than anything else, right? But there were so many patent medicines that all had heroin in it. It was a very quick acting drug, even in liquid form. And the reason is that addition of the acetyl molecule allows it to pass the blood-brain barrier, at which point your body does what? Converts it into the morphine molecule. Anything that you put into your body, it's going to convert to the morphine molecule. When you take a drug test in prison and they test you looking for heroin, they're not looking for the more modern test for something called 6-MAM, which is 6-monoacetylmorphine. This is something that is apparent in your body until your body can process the heroin and turn it into morphine, at which point it can process it out through the liver. It does that with every opioid you put in your body. It's going to do whatever it has to do to turn it into morphine, the morphine molecule. And then it can flush it out through the liver and do all of that stuff. It was way more addicting. The fact that it passed the blood-brain barrier as fast as it did meant that you're getting the same relief you're going to get from morphine, except you're going to get it like that. It's instantly going to be one of those things. Like cocaine and Coca-Cola, says Ashley G. They most assuredly used real coca leaves, making the original brain tonic. And I promise you it was more effective than caffeine. It also brought people back. They continued to buy tons of it. In 1914, the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act made the first American drug law. And it made cocaine and heroin and some of the other stuff illegal. And they also started prosecuting doctors for writing prescriptions. 1959, fentanyl, created by Dr. Paul Janssen in Belgium. May he rot. Sorry. 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine, approved for medical use in the 1960s, mainly anesthesia. Paved the way for a whole family of fentanyls. Sufentanil, carfentanil, alfentanil, refentanil. There was a lot of different versions of that drug. In the 60s and 70s, Nixon declares war on drugs. He calls it public enemy number one. Heroin is linked to Vietnam soldiers and urban crime. Enforcement ramps up while pharma keeps making new opioids. In the 1980s and 90s, OxyContin, hydrocodone, marketed as safe, both. And I'll tell you something, hydrocodone is a fairly safe drug. It really is. Because it's given to people for really short periods of time. It's rare that a doctor will write you prescriptions for hydrocodone forever. And the reason is it has a ton of acetaminophen in it, which is tough on your liver. So it's usually a opioid that's given if you get your teeth pulled or you're having pain after a surgery, and they'll give it to you for 14 days. More than likely, you're not going to catch a habit. OxyContin, on the other hand, was being sold to everybody, and they were being told that you got nothing to worry about. You got nothing to worry about. Really kind of ugly. But if we start tracing this back, how do we go from this stuff gets designed? They allow this stuff to be sold. Yet we're going to go after all of the people that get addicted to this stuff and do everything within our power to destroy their lives. There's a book called Chasing the Scream by Jonathan Hari. It's an absolutely incredible book. It was one of the first guys that I ever heard say that he believed the opposite of addiction was connection. He was one of the first authors. Since then, by the way, I've read hundreds of them that have said that, and I'm not exaggerating. But he was the first author I ever read that talked about the rat experiment, where the rats were given a utopia versus given a little cage where your only option was do some drugs or sit around in a cage with nothing to do. I did that. More often than not, people will choose drugs. Not always. Took a miracle. But you know what that miracle was for me inside? I got out, right? I started going to the library every night with Q. When I wasn't doing that, I was working at Unicor. I had a job there. Then I got moved to the Unicor unit. And all of a sudden, it didn't feel like prison anymore. There was tons of stuff to do. There were people to talk to. I could talk to people that weren't in my race, which is pretty rare inside. But that was the first person I ever heard bring that up. His book came out in January of 2015. I was in my I'm reading a lot of books phase at that point on account of the incarceration. But it's a fascinating story, and it starts out talking about the first commissioner of the U.S. Federal Bureau of Narcotics. His name was Harry J. Aislinger. And with all due respect to Mr. Aislinger's descendants, I hope he's rotting in hell. God forgive me. Hope the guy's rotting in hell. His wife had a vicious drug addiction. His wife allegedly was viciously addicted to morphine. And he started a campaign to try to go after people. He's the guy that brought you all of the reefer madness style propaganda. He did more to damage drug users than anybody in history. He went after Billie Holiday. If you know the story of Billie Holiday, it's horrific. It's a horrific story. She died chained to a bed on Aislinger's, on his orders. Prohibition and the vicious prosecution of people that couldn't fall in line with that prohibition was brought on by Aislinger. And since then, we have put more people in prison for trying to treat pain than almost anything. Because you could say, well, you know, a lot of them are in there for cocaine. Trust me when I say this, and it may not make sense to all of you, but those who share in a particular form of addiction will know what I'm talking about. People snorting cocaine are doing it to remove pain. It's a different kind of pain. But drugs in general are meant to make you stop thinking about the things in your life that make you miserable. You take a drug and it takes you up. You take a drug, it takes you down. You take a drug that makes you sideways. Whatever the hell you're doing, it turns off that give a crap function that all of us have in our brain. Nothing does it better than the morphine molecule. Every drug on planet Earth, when it grows up, wants to be the morphine molecule, because in a very short period of time, it takes over the host organism. You understand what I'm saying? And the reason that I'm talking about this, the reason that this is important is because when you see me standing there on some of my brother's videos that he put up today, and you see me standing there talking to 32 guys through a translator, every one of those men are a slave to the morphine molecule. And they may not look like it in the moment. But even with the best intent and driving forward and knowing you can beat this and absolutely loving life, if you threw a bag on the table and you left the room, they would beat each other to death to get that bag. It has an amazing way that even when you are feeling immensely content, even when you think that life is perfect, it drops in front of you, and all of a sudden, the things in life that aren't perfect start to move to the frontal lobe. The executive function of your brain will start to focus in on every single thing about your life that sucks. All of the people that did you dirty, every injury physically that you ever had, all of the times. Yeah, Chris says Molly makes you feel that way as well. Trust me, I know. Yeah, Molly being a reference to, it's what these days they call methyl dioxymethamphetamine, MDMA. Back in the day when it was coming from Germany, it was called ecstasy. And it is a drug, because it is a methyl-based drug. Chris is spot on. This is a drug that releases so much feel-good chemical into your brain. You have to realize that most of the time when you're doing dope, it's your own brain chemicals that are getting you high. Put a deuce in the chat if you have ever experimented with mushrooms or LSD. Two drugs that are dissociative drugs. That means they're trip drugs. You take them and you're literally blending the line between this is normal and I can't figure this out, right? It literally blends that line to a point where you're struggling to know what's real and what's not. So a lot of us have tried that. A lot of people have tried fungus. There's an odd thing about both of those drugs, and that is that if you did it on Monday and you did it on Tuesday, by Wednesday, you're not going to get high, right? You take a hit of acid on Monday, you take one on Tuesday and you get a little bit of a buzz, but on Wednesday, you take that same dose, nothing is going to happen. And the reason nothing is going to happen is because you're burning through the store of all of the chemicals in your brain that are making you hallucinate, making you hear things that aren't there. Rowdy brain chemicals. Now, if you toured with the Grateful Dead and you wanted to get high for the entire summer season, by the end of that summer season, you're eating 150 hits just trying to feel something, because it's literally taking that much lysergic to kick your brain on. Same thing with mushrooms. If you eat a gram of mushrooms every day, by day 4, you're not going to be feeling a damn thing. You're going to have to up your dose, and you're going to have to heroically up your dose, which is a bad idea, by the way. Those heroic doses, and I know that there are people who are going to send me emails and go, it changed my life, bro. Good for you. Good for you. It also makes a lot of people accidentally step into traffic. You know, there's a lot of people that don't respect those drugs at all, and I understand that there are great uses and that they're using them for people that come back from war, and it's done great things. And I am an advocate for psilocybin. It destroys the ego. If you're somebody that can do it, I think it's a fantastic thing to occasionally do it, but I don't think you should go to rock concerts. You know what I mean? I don't think you should play with blue lights. I think you should probably go into a dark room and meditate, pray, do whatever you do, because it will destroy your ego. It'll make you realize if you're a jackwagon, you're going to know you're a jackwagon. It always fascinated me about dissociative drugs. You know, guys would snort coke through $100 bill, and they could be the biggest jackwagon on planet Earth, but they thought they were cooler than anybody as soon as they did that snout. How long was that? 15 seconds?
Yeah.
Giggity. Anyway, you sniff that stuff and instantly you think you're cool. You're not, but the drug will tell you you are. It's that kind of brain chemical release. Starts making you think you're a little bit superior. The dissociative family of drugs does the exact opposite because it destroys ego. And you're left with what you really are, right? And that's kind of rugged. Dane Young says, ayahuasca. We have a friend who lives in this country that has done that 60 times. Can you wrap your brain around that? Has done that 60 times. Why do you think Mario changed after the mushrooms? Yeah, they know. There's definitely a lot of drug references through a lot of that stuff. Tommy Bird says, no, Molly is not ecstasy, at least not the X we once did. Molly gives me almost a crack-like crash the next day, hungover, way worse than ecstasy ever did. Used to do a little OJ the next day and good. Well, I'll tell you something. This is actually something that unfortunately I know a decent amount about because, and this will show up when you, spoiler alert on the book, we farted around with the manufacturing of MDMA at one time in our life. And it is, you know, you start out basically with speed. So once they started to make it very difficult to get the ingredients necessary to make real ecstasy, designers started to spin out all kinds of other things that they mixed with a really heavy dose of speed to give you that kind of, that sensory euphoria kind of feeling. Mushrooms about destroyed my mind completely. Somebody told me that if I did mushrooms, it would help me with my depression and it will take away the cravings of other drugs. Lies. You know what? For Jesus, yes and no. Yes and no. The drug, the dissociative drug that actually has a really good reputation for making you never want to do other drugs comes from the iboga plant. It's called ibogaine. It is another drug that will make you trip. You'll have a very similar experience to well, as close as you can say to something like psilocybe cubensis. It is different. Mushrooms, I've never met anybody that that tripped and went, poof, I never want to do drugs again. That's usually not known for that particular, for that drug. Ibogaine is the one that they talk about a lot for that. And it didn't do it for me. It did it for a couple of friends of mine. We went through the same programs. For me, it lasted about 30 to 90 days. And I say 30 to 90 because I did it more than once. But I never got that. I never want to do this again, ever. Like that didn't happen for me, unfortunately. It took a lot longer and a lot more journaling and things along that line in order to make that happen. But Harry Aslinger single-handedly decided what drug policy would be in this country. His decision. He would go home every night to a wife who was screaming, needing a fix of morphine. That's probably not a cat you want writing your drug laws. For real. That's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. But we have done such a disservice to the world and especially to the people of the hemisphere of the United States. You hear people talking about Mexico being a narco state. Why do you think that is? Think about it. Because they sit on the border of the biggest consumers of dope on planet Earth. There is no country that does drugs like the United States of America. Not even close. And the crazy thing is it doesn't seem to dissuade anybody even slightly. The last of the drugs, the ones that where we're at now, because everybody thinks that we're into the fentanyl phase, but we're not. In 2019, underground labs started to really crank out illicit nitazines, phytonitazines, isonitazines. This is a drug that was synthesized in Switzerland by CIBA, C-I-B-A Corporation. They shelved it, much like most of the drugs first happened. Like when Paul Janssen in Belgium first made fentanyl, they didn't start really going heavy with that stuff because they realized just how dangerous this stuff was. They did. It's the same reason nitazine sat on the shelf. It was way too strong. It was 40 to 70 times stronger than fentanyl, which they say is 100 times stronger than heroin. I've done fentanyl. I've not done this street crap in the perk 30s. Thank God. Thank God. Hey, and if you're listening to the sound of my voice, you popped on here because it said heroin. If you're getting a pill and it's blue and you crush it up and it's blue on the inside, it ain't a Perk 30. Perk 30s were white on the inside. The outside of them had a coating on there, put there by the Sackler family, so that in theory, the 30 milligrams would be delivered to you throughout an 8-hour period of time. Now, that's not happening to anybody in America because they're chiseling the outside of that coating off, just like the Sacklers knew you would. It happened with their MS Contin, which was the first, CONTIN product. Then they took Percocet and put the CONTIN product, the time release. A OxyContin is an 80 milligram Percodan split out into you over the course of 8 to 14 hours. That's the plan. After my mushroom trip, I thought Jesus came to me and told me he better not catch me back there again. Well, you know what? I would take that as a solid piece of advice to maybe not do it again. It sounds to me like you didn't have a great reaction to the substance. It's on the bright side, there's nobody out there wildly addicted to those kinds of drugs because it's very difficult to do them every day. There are people that abuse them, but there's people that abuse virtually everything. In 1998, the fentanyl patch came out from Janssen. By the way, Janssen got swallowed up by Johnson & Johnson. So Johnson & Johnson was big into bringing fentanyl to the U.S. The fentanyl lollipop in 1998. And in 2010, China and Mexico flood the world with illicit fentanyl. And not to be a jerk, not to be one of those guys that just rails against things all the time, because it is kind of my name brand. But how do you pass a law that says you can't ship any fentanyl to this hemisphere ever again, and not write in that bill or any of the ingredients to make fentanyl? Do you think that's an accident? Here's why I don't buy that. Because the United States has gone through this. They went through it with MDMA, right? When they first made ecstasy illegal in the places that were allowing you to buy it in bars, Texas being one of them, when they first made it illegal, they didn't make all methyl-based designer drugs illegal, which is what they should have done. If it's a methyl-based drug, you can't make it, right? Unless you're a chemist, a pharmacist, or whatever. They didn't do that. They weren't smart enough to do that. So it took about 7 to 8 years for the stuff to actually go away, because they would tweak one little molecule and say, that's not MDMA. I've told the story many times. I got caught with a bag of 1,000 pills that I bought, ecstasy pills. And I called an attorney that charged an absolute fortune. And when he came in the morning, I said to him, listen, as far as the payment, he goes, this one's on me. I said, run that by me again? He said, this one's on me. I said, why is that? He goes, look, we'll figure it out in court. We walked into court. They brought up a piece of paper, and written across the top of it, it said, not dope. And they dropped the charges. And the craziest part of that story is that when they let me go, I went up to get my property, and the guy slapped an entire bag of pills up on the counter. I was like, those aren't mine. Those aren't mine. I figured the second I picked him up, they were going to arrest me. He's like, well, then you could toss them in the trash. I'm like, no, man. No. He's like, well, then I'll toss them in the trash. And he started to pull them back. I grabbed them. They took 2 of them out to test, I guess. Or maybe they took 1 out to test, and the guy wanted to get high on one. I don't know. But there were 2 pills missing. And I'll tell you something. That stuff was rocket fuel. What it wasn't was methyldioxymethamphetamine. Right? It wasn't MDMA. It was something completely different. But knowing that we've been through this before, why did we say when we passed the law, right, or we did a deal with China saying you can't ship fentanyl to the United States anymore? Duh. Why didn't we say you also can't ship the precursors to make it? That seems like a pretty glaring friggin' error. And since this started in the 2010s, it really took 15 years for us to get a hold of this. I'm of the firm belief that this is a manufactured epidemic. This is an epidemic manufactured to do one thing, and that's to kill people in huge quantities. And it's not just killing us here, it's killing us all over the world. But it's killing us in the United States and parts of Canada like no place else. God forbid somebody attacked the shores of the United States. They pulled boats up and just started unloading soldiers. You know what happens, right? Sure, you send the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, all of that. And then everybody else of that age, right, say 18 to 50, and if you're going 50, I promise you I could carry a weapon. I mean, not legally, but if I had to fight, I could fight. But if the number one cause of death between 18 and 50 is drug overdose, how many people did you not kill? How many people are just so strung out that if they don't get their dope, they're not going to do a damn thing? There have been multiple busts in the United States where they found storage lots full of codeine and petrochemical products designed to break that codeine down into an injectable form. In the rest of the world, they call that stuff crocodile. And it is the last bastion for junkies. It's cheaper than any buzz on planet Earth. Once you do the first shot, you're a dead man or woman. There are so few crocodile survivors on Earth, it's hard to find someone that's been interviewed, because everybody that starts to do it dies from it. The infections that come from it, the staph infections, it eats away your skin, and it very much gives you the appearance of almost having a reptilian deal on the outside of your skin, which is kind of crazy because that's not actually how it got the name crocodile. But it's a Russian phrase, I guess, that has meaning in some other way, but it sure as hell looks like it turns people into that kind of skin. But the fact that there were supplies of this, 50-gallon drums full of stuff so that they could take raw codeine and turn it into crocodile, tells me that we're in a series of moves that are being made that are literally destroying the fabric of our society. There have been a lot of countries along the way that have tapped out to this, that have literally just tapped out. And in the book, Chasing the Scream, they talk about a lot of these countries that said, you know what, we're not going to play these games. Do you know what I find absolutely fascinating about those countries? If by some chance you say, we're not going to do this, we're not going to play this game, we're not going to incarcerate most of our society for using substances, we're going to treat it as a disease and try to help these people. You know the first thing that happens to your country? Uncle Sam says, you're never going to get another dollar as long as you live from the United States of America. If you legalize these substances, you will never get another dollar from the United States of America. That includes disasters, tragedies, all kinds of stuff. We don't play, apparently, with countries that make drugs legal. Do you find that odd? It's almost as if the United States wants this embargo on drugs. They want these things to be black marketed. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? The first heroin epidemic timed perfectly with Vietnam. Absolutely perfect. The first time we had a really big problem, I mean outside of the Civil War, but those were soldiers that were injured. People just straight abusing the substance of heroin. You know, overdoses reaching over 4,000, closing in on 5,000 overdoses in a year, which was astonishing at the time. It doesn't touch the 106,000 a year that we're losing now, but it's still a scary number. Well, that coincided beautifully with the war in Vietnam. Why? Well, because you were right in the heroin trade capital of Southeast Asia. It seems like everywhere we send our troops, the CIA is very close by. That's right. Central Intelligence Agency. I got demonetized when I put heroin on the title. Doesn't much matter at this point. When the Central Intelligence Agency decided that they were just going to grab a bunch of this dope, bring it home, sell it, and then they could go and fight wars that they didn't need to ask Congress for money for. Like the war in South America. Remember when the Nicaraguan Contras and the Sandinista government were fighting, and we were funding one side of it, doing it through this entirely crazy way of selling guns to Iran, right, that they could use in the war with Iran and Iraq. It was absolutely crazy. You say, how can you sell guns to your enemy? Well, we didn't. We sold it to another country. It sold it to our enemy. Nevertheless, it was a big tangled mess of crap. But part of that was them bringing bricks of cocaine back into the United States. But they didn't want to drive it to Florida and have people buy it at $100 a gram. They added just a little bit of baking soda, turned it into crack cocaine that you could smoke, and thought they would just sell, $50, $100 million worth of in LA, and then booyah, they'd be able to fund more of their secret wars. But crack was a disease, like every other addiction out there. It's a disease, and the disease jumped out of the petri dish. And the next thing you knew, you had people selling crack in every city in the United States, and the crack wars started flying. Bodies started piling up. The president of the United States held up a brick, right? About a half a pound of rock. And he said, I just bought this, or had it bought within a half a mile of the White House. Made a big speech about it. They ushered in the mandatory minimum for the possession of crack cocaine, in some cases going as high as 30-1. So if you got caught with a gram of powdered cocaine, you got charged with a gram of powdered cocaine. If you got caught with a gram of rock cocaine, you got charged with 30 grams. Does that sound fair to you, Johnny Scoville?
It is not.
But the guys writing the laws, they had those little plastic bullets in their pocket. Take it out and do a little bump. I mean, they're working late night. Never met lawyers that didn't like cocaine. I'm sorry, it's the truth. Married one. Lawyers love blow. But they're not smoking it. They're not rocking it up. That was black people. That was black people that were rocking it up. And the crack laws were some of the most racist laws that we ever passed in the United States of America, plain and simple. Now, they've been overturned, and those people got released, but not before pissing away a lot of their lives. Funny thing, too, is that the guy that wrote that bill, Joe Biden stood up on the floor and held up a 25-cent piece and bragged that if you get caught with a crack rock this small, you're going to go to prison for a mandatory minimum of a decade. His kid makes a video years later with 20 grams in the bottom of a sack that he just bought from a hooker. He didn't get 20. He didn't get 20. He got fat contracts in other countries. I won't go down that rabbit hole because we could do it forever. We're living in a world where desperation causes people to seek out substances to make them feel comfortable in their own skin. Plain and simple. For those people that would never go down that road, there is this, right? And all of the things that attach itself to this. And there's a ton of them. There are so many things that this can do for you. You can get addicted to AI. You can get addicted to video games. South Korea, which, don't get it messed up, South Korea is the 5th largest economy in the world, I believe. They're about as high tech. They may be this big, but they are a powerhouse of a country. And they list as their number one problem addiction to computers. Whether it's video games, whether it's AI, whatever it is addiction to computers. I said the other day, there are an estimated 4 million people on planet Earth today. By the way, that's a drop in a bucket. We can all agree to that. But there are 4 million people on planet Earth that have said they are in love with a computer. They no longer want any contact with people. And in many cases, they would like to marry the computer program. Yee! What the deuce? Not doing that Bible thing. But in Daniel 12, it says, in the end days, men will be in love with themselves. If you are in love with a computer, you are in love with yourself. It's a mirror. It's spitting back exactly what you want to hear. You tell it what you want to hear. And unlike a human being that has so much else going on in their head, your significant other hears when you say, this is what I need from you. But your significant other has 9,000 things going on at the same time that they're trying to juggle and do all that. AI only has one mission. And that's to tell you exactly what you want to hear so that you spend more time talking to AI. The most popular app in Japan today is the Grok version of the AI companion. Do the causes of addiction vary from country to country, or do you think they're the same globally? The causes of addiction is a lack of connection, it's a lack of property, and it's a lack of pride. Those three things, I think, drive addiction more than anything. People that feel like they have nothing. It's amazing when you're in a place that materialism has not caught fire yet. And you know what? It's about to, I promise you. Because you walk around here and it feels exactly like 1985. Does it not? Well, at the end of the 80s, I mean, the 80s was the decade of greed, no? China has developed a way to implant a fetus into a synthetic womb, a robot that can carry a baby to term. Not kidding, says Dane Young. Yeah, Barbara, it's the same thing everywhere you go. It's the exact same thing everywhere you go. It's a lack of connection. Now, it may be a lack of connection for different reasons. And there are people who will say, yeah, I got a friend that goes down to the pub every single night of the week and plays darts. You can be in a room full of people. At the absolute worst of my heroin addiction, I hung out with about 12 to 15 people on a regular basis. Every single day I ran into them. because we were the only people on planet Earth that could trust each other. Not because we were good people. We just knew that none of those 12 people had a badge. And you get to a point where your biggest fear on Earth is that someone's going to put handcuffs on you and you're going to have to kick heroin in a jail cell. So people, addicts who are really deep in it, just start hanging with each other. And I was absolutely more alone than I had ever been in my life. I was surrounded by people, but there's no connection. Connection doesn't mean you're in the room with people. Why do you think journaling is such a massive thing? Why do you think I beat the crap out of talking about journaling? Journaling is you talking about the things that are important to you without anybody going, oh yeah, that's nothing. This one time I did, right? It's you putting your thoughts out so that you can reread them and you can hear what's going on in your own mind. Because connection, there was a time where we used to sit down and talk to people about this. I remember a time where we would get on telephones. Do you remember this? And you might talk for 6 hours on a telephone because there was no other form of communication. The telephone actually brought people closer. It really did. There was massive connection. You guys think of your first high school sweetheart and how much time you spent on a telephone to them. It jumps out at me because she was in a long distance area code. No joke. I actually had to pay by the minute to talk to her. And my father would just absolutely lose his mind. Do you know what the bill was? Yeah. But we used to talk and we would tell people about what's going on in our life. And it was connection. It may not have been in person, but it was freaking connection. The world doesn't want anybody connected anymore. People don't go to the prom. Do you realize this? People don't go to the prom. People don't get driver's licenses at 16 anymore. You're darn right you do. Sorry, but you really do. You absolutely need to journal. Journaling is two things. It's your greatest therapist ever. And if you happen to go to a therapist, it makes the greatest therapist in the world 10 times better. Show up to your therapy session with your journal and watch your therapist just go, let's dive into this. I'm still shocked at how much stuff I can put in a closet. Even when I'm living right, how much stuff I still shove in a closet. And those closets have massive effects. When you're not living things in the real time, when there are things coming into your life that you do not cope with, you're going to cope with them. Or you're going to find a chemical to make it so that you don't have to. Journaling is so much cheaper than heroin. I'm not kidding.
Safer too.
Way safer. It's hard to overdose on a journal. The day that helicopter came to get me, this is how screwed up my mind was, right? When they took me I got out of the truck voluntarily, I put my hands out. It took a long time because I had one bag of dope between the seats. And at that point in my life, one bag of dope didn't get me high, not even close. But it would keep me from, bouncing a foot up and down as hard as I could and shaking violently. So I cooked it and shot it. And then I put both hands out the window. When the cop pulled me out of the car to pat me down, he found a bag of dope in my pocket. And all I could think about was I could have shot that bag. If I had known that thing was in my pocket, I still would have been in the truck. There's no way I would have got out. I shot that bag. And I was so pissed. It's not logical, right? Who in their right mind robs a bank? You know the correct answer to that, right? No one in their right mind robs a bank. The synthesis of the morphine molecule in 1803 took the most addictive substance on planet Earth and threw a supercharger on it. There had been people addicted to opium and products made from opium for a very long time. It was a very abused drug that enslaved people all over the world. Removing the alkaloid out of the sap of the poppy plant and turning it into heroin, right, or turning it into morphine rather, changed the ball game. Now there was a way to give this in. You think of a shot of morphine and you think it hits you instantly. It doesn't. The difference between heroin and morphine is that heroin actually hits you instantly, passes the blood-brain barrier, and it is almost instantly wasted. You see the scenes in movies and the guy shoots, and before he gets the needle out of his arm, he's doing well, that's very real. With morphine, it takes about a minute and a half. Doesn't mean you're not feeling it instantly, but you're not getting that punch for about a minute and a half. It's just a very, very different substance. It seems that since then, we have felt the need to jump that up. There is no reason on earth that you need a pain medication stronger than morphine. There isn't. I'm sorry. And when OxyContin came out, a lot of people know the word Dilaudid, right? That's hydromorphone. Hydromorphone, oxymorphone. It's a rowdy drug, absolutely a very, very rowdy drug. And most heroin addicts, if they have an option of getting a manufactured pill, they will take Dilaudid, because that hydromorphone is closer to feeling like heroin than just about anything out there. They took that and put a time release on it like they did with OxyContin, and they called it Opana. And they were finally smart enough to go, there's no reason that a drug this strong needs to be on the market. Guess what? There's no reason for a drug as strong as fentanyl to be on the market either. And I know people are going to say, well, if you stay on morphine long enough, you build up a tolerance to it. Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. If you're taking it the right way, I'm not sure that happens to the same degree. I sure as hell wasn't taking it the right way. I've been very stressed since I was laid off. The psych nurse practitioner was impressed. I've only taken Klonopin once in 3 weeks. I've been drinking only 3 to 4 times a week now. That's harm reduction. Everybody get that? That's massive harm reduction. Renee B., you should slap the crap out of your own back. For real. If you have Klonopin in the house and you're not taking it, that says wonderful things about your dedication. For those that don't know, Klonopin is a benzodiazepine. The chemical name is clonazepam, and it is really tough. NDEP is oxymorphone. Thank you. Dilaudid is hydromorphone. Rugged drug. Rugged drug. But fentanyl lollipops, fentanyl patches, hey, I want people in pain to not be in pain. I really do. But I've slammed enough morphine, right? Or enough morphine sulfate. MS Contin was a drug that you could get so easily. There's a period of time where those things were on the street and they were cheap. And I'm telling you right now, I don't care what pain you've got going, that'll take care of it. Somebody puts that in your vein, the pain's over. I promise. It's terrifying that we stopped messing with Mother Nature and we started messing with the labs. The dope that's on the street today doesn't have to answer to a poppy. It can go stronger and stronger and stronger. Riley's Human says, sorry to interrupt your stream. No, but believe it or not, that's what we do here, right? We want you to interrupt with comments. I just watched you speak to the guys, tears rolling down my face. No words for the changes in you and Johnny are nothing other than God's hands touching you. What a cool thing to say, man. Thank you, Riley's Human. What a cool thing to say. I'll be honest. I'm getting way more out of those guys than they're getting out of me and my brother. If you did watch that video, you probably heard me talk about recharging my batteries. People, I'm a cynic. You want to pray for me? You can pray for that. I'm a cynic. I really am. I don't believe anything anymore. And I don't mean faith. I got that on lock. But everything down here, I believe nothing anymore. And it's hard because I grew up a guy that I can tell you the words to every single schoolhouse rock ever made. I said the Pledge of Allegiance. When Olympic skiers won gold medals and they played the national anthem, I cry like a baby. I ugly cry. And I don't trust my country at all anymore. That's a bummer. It really is. It's a bummer. I don't trust the cops. 222 times a year, a cop gets busted putting drugs on somebody that didn't do anything wrong. How is that okay? How do you not go, every drug case got to be thrown out? If it happens, there's 365 days in a year. That means it happens more days than it doesn't. I don't believe in anything anymore. I had a lot of hope that we were going to see what happened with Epstein. Not because I'm a filthy voyeur and I want to know the details, because I feel like 1,000 women were sacrificed for the greater good. And that makes me throw up in my mouth. Maybe it's because so many people who are rape victims end up junkies. Maybe it's because sexual assault turns out drug addicts. They either go the route of they're going to journal and they're going to go to group therapy with other people that have survived the same stuff, or they wind up drinking or drugging so that they can cope with what has happened to them. Maybe that's why it pisses me off so much. The fentanyl and opioid crisis is nothing but chemical warfare being allowed to happen by our own country. Well, it certainly seems that way, doesn't it? I mean, it certainly seems that way. And the reason it seems that way, and I know that I beat this to death, but I'm a drug addict. I'm a lifelong drug addict. I spent way more time addicted to dope than I ever spent sober, right? Even if I go the rest of my life, it's going to be hard to ever catch up to the amount of time I spent doing dope. And I can't tell you how many times I watched a new batch of dope come into a town and kill someone. And instantly, the dealers start cutting it. They start whacking that dope so that it will not kill the next person. You know why? Because dead people don't buy dope. The desire is to make money. Dead people don't buy dope. How is it that these overdoses have been going on for as long as they have? They haven't backed off. They added xylazine, so Narcan wouldn't work. Right now we have Trank. For those who are lucky enough to not know, Trank is a very similar drug to the benzodiazepine family, except it's used on equine or horses and bovine cows. This is actually stuff that people are getting from pharmacists, large, distributors who sell drugs to pharmacists. That's where they get the xylazine. But they're not even putting human stuff in there. But they make this drug that people are shooting, and it's an ugly system. You can't convince me that this isn't chemical warfare. A good friend of mine fell from an attic into the garage. So many fractures. She's thankful to God for her blessings. Got me back to church after 2 months. Well, good deal. I'm sorry to hear she fell. Anything that gets somebody back into church. Church is connection. You realize that. If we're all wrong, church is still connection. We're not, by the way. But even if we are, we fell apart as a world when we stopped connecting with one another. I remember growing up, and my mother she went to the school board meeting, right, one day a week. She had a thing that they called Wednesday night club every single Wednesday night, my entire life. My mom got together with her friends on Wednesday night club. They played canasta a couple of times a week. She was on a volleyball team. She was a member of the fire squad, the fast squad that would go out and act like an ambulance before ambulances got there. They had a series of these little radio devices so that, because we lived in the sticks, and if the accident was really far from where they called it in, they would send somebody to get there before the ambulance would. But she was into all of this. And my dad had just as busy a schedule. And it's not like that anymore. We don't have a tribe. We don't have a community. It's amazing. Sorry? Yeah, they stare at screens. It's fascinating to walk into a room of people. Look, we're not famous. He might be a little bit, right? He's done reality shows and stuff, but we're not famous. We're just guys that make a living in a really bizarre way. But in this country, most of these guys have never heard of YouTube, right? You have to say, what I do for a living is really bizarre. Every time we show up, there are 2 new people that found YouTube, and you can tell because we get treated differently from them instantly. One walked up to my brother today while I was standing there and went, "Hey, Johnny Scoville." I don't remember them ever saying the last name, ever. They just introduced us as Tommy and Johnny, which means the guy found Chase the Heat. Nothing wrong with that, but we're instantly treated differently. I was going there today, and I was going to do a show that all of you have heard before. I was going to do one of my pat shows that I do about supporting one another, and probably the birds flying south for winter kind of a thing, like Johnny did the other day, or some version of that, sled dogs, something in nature that shows that when we work together, then there's a process of somebody being the lead dog, doing most of the work, and then having to rotate that dog through kind of a thing. But I got there, and as I walked up to start talking, I was like, that's not what I'm going to talk about. The guy saying, people get upset when I say the word junkie. If you knew how many times I called myself a junkie, if you watched the speech that I did there today, the farther I get away from the last time I plunged a needle into my arm, the farther I get away from the last time I stole something so that I could get high, the farther away I get from a prison cell. It gets a lot easier to forget the miracle that gets you sober. And you would think that working with other people and trying to help people find their own miracle would be something that keeps you reminded constantly, and that's just not what happens. It isn't. Boy, when you get around them in person, though, when you're around a group of people and you look out and, Johnny films from the back, you can't see the faces of the people I'm looking at. And while every single person is staring me directly in the eye, right? Absolutely no two ways about it. They're all locked in. They're all paying attention. But there are people there that are hurting, that are visibly hurting. Honestly, I thought Mac looked tougher today than he did the week before. And that's probably a bit of the bloom wearing off of the rose. As addicts, regardless of what the addiction is, we build up the addiction as Satan and everything else on planet Earth. If I didn't drink, all of this would be better. If I didn't smoke crack, all of this would be better. If I wasn't a heroin addict, I wouldn't have a problem on planet Earth. And it makes sense to the addict because the only problem they have is heroin, right? They're not doing anything but they're stealing to get heroin. They're lying to get heroin. They're hitchhiking to get heroin. Everything they do is to get heroin. If that was gone, my life would be set. Then you find out that goes away and they still want taxes and you still need to have a job. And you know what? You got to pay to have a roof over your head. And your kids are still going to call you and ask you for money. And all of these things that are just part of the human experience don't go away when you kick your drug off, right? When you fire the drug that's been running your life, life doesn't get perfect. I wish it did, but it doesn't. If you want that to happen, start praying. Won't make your life perfect. Just might give it meaning. You know what I mean? It's an amazing thing to go out and stand among people that are getting up every day in spite of the fact that virtually every single molecule in their body is screaming at them to stay in bed. And they're not just getting up and walking out. When we show up there, those guys put on their Sunday best. When we see them, they've put on their shirts. Like these guys are dressed to the nines. And I would imagine that most of them don't have more than 4 shirts. But they save one that looks fantastic so that when we show up there on Thursday, they always want to look good. There is something so humbling about being in the midst of 32 miracles happening at the same time. Makes you feel really unworthy of being there if you want to know the truth.
And they pray for us.
Yeah. Today, while we were there, when I was done making my presentation to the guys, we were just getting ready to eat. Before we did, the man that runs the facility said, if we could say a quick prayer. We expected that. They pray before everything. They pray before lunch. They pray before dinner. They pray before dessert. They pray. But the prayer was just for me and my brother. And listening to David do this prayer, while 32 other guys were murmuring their prayers at the same time, it was one of the most beautiful sounds I've ever heard. I promise you there wasn't a dude there that wasn't saying something. And then I walked back and I got to get online. And you know what? The 57 of you are here. You guys are fantastic. You're beautiful human beings, every last one of you. And you're miracles, every last one of you. But there's so much hate on this platform, it's enough to make you want to vomit. Tommy, would it be possible to make a class action lawsuit for all of the OxyContin pills in the 90s that doctors gave out like candy, as it was not fair to lie to everyone saying OC pills are not addictive? You want to know the funny thing about that, Helsinki? That lawsuit happened. Between all of the Sackler family alone, I think got hit for $6 billion. Of course, they made 13. So killing 1 million people, you get to keep the lion's share of your money. 7 goes to you, 6 goes to the government. We'll call it all even. There were class action lawsuits. The trouble is this: the money doesn't go to us. I was given 1280s a day. And the woman said to me, as God is my witness, the woman said to me, word for word, you got to try to get addicted to this. I did, and it took about 4 days. It was dope. That's all it was. The difference is it was never bad dope, right? You never got a pill that didn't go bang. You never got a pill that somebody stepped on. You never got a pill that just what didn't come from that good a poppy plant. That never happened. I really wanted to talk about the miracles today. But you know what? If you don't talk about the black, then you can't look at the white. If you don't talk about the dark, you can't talk about the light. This is the ugliest substance on planet Earth. The reason that these guys are miracles in the sense of the word that they are is because the morphine molecule isn't like other drugs. All drugs make you want to do more drugs, right? There's nothing unique about that. The difference is that there's only a handful of them that will make you violently ill when you don't do them. And the morphine molecule is better at that than anything else in the world. You do it for a couple of weeks, now you have a habit. And that habit demands that you feed it virtually every day, usually more than once a day. I heard a guy say once, and I'll end with this. I heard a guy once that was talking about heroin addiction. And he came in to do a speech on it in prison. And at the time, I was the only junkie in prison that was addicted to heroin. Me and one other dude that didn't talk much. Everybody else was in there for meth because it was during that time when meth was just sort of king. But somebody raised their hand and said, like, I do meth because it makes me able to work for 24 hours straight. And it gives me super amounts of energy and it makes me feel like a Superman. I can't understand why somebody would do heroin, especially as long as you have. And the guy said, it's the simplicity. It's the simplicity. No, the morphine molecule is, there are other drugs that you go into physical withdrawal from, but opioids in general, and all of those are a version of the morphine molecule. That's the one that really is brutal. Because of the fact that it's a painkiller, when you start to feel the withdrawals, all the pain comes back. Spiritual pain, physical pain, emotional pain. A torn Achilles tendon from 1988 is going to drive you nuts. A knee surgery from 1991 is going to drive you nuts. A shoulder surgery from 2003. All of these pains just start going like this. And it has given you a sense of everything is perfect. And now that it's gone, you have the exact opposite. And you sit there and literally freak out. And people just, they go nuts. They need that, the feeling and the guilt and everything that they've been putting away for maybe decades is now going to go away. But the guy said, I'm a junkie because of the simplicity of it. He said, you know, now I'm sober. I worry about my kid. I worry about my other kid. I worry about the 32 guys at this center. I worry about the visa process. I worry about, there's 500 things I worry about. When I was a heroin addict, there was one thing, right? It was either I'm doing heroin or I got to go get heroin. It was the only two things. There was nothing else. Benzodiazepines and alcohol withdrawal can kill you if you go cold turkey. One of the tenets of the lifeboat, and now the love boat, is if you're getting ready to quit anything, talk to a doctor. I'm a junkie. I can tell you what it feels like. I can tell you what kicking's like. But if you're going to quit, talk to a doctor. Medical advances, even psychological and psychiatric advances have gotten to the point where healthcare professionals can do an amazing job to help you quit. Don't try to do it on your own. And God forbid you're quitting alcohol or benzodiazepines. You can back off, but you still want to talk to a doctor before you do that. Because these medications, by the way, they do the same thing in the body. Benzos and alcohol do the same thing. If you're an alcoholic, going cold turkey, let's say you're drinking a fifth a day, you go cold turkey, it can kill you. So if they put you in rehab, they give you benzos to treat the withdrawal. Because benzos are alcohol in a pill. If you've ever had a Valium, what's it feel like? Like a 6-pack of beer, right? Well, a 10 milligram Valium feels like a 6-pack of beer. It really makes the process of quitting so difficult. Because as you start to quit, every day a new brick gets added into the wall of, here's something I have to think about. Here's something else I have to think about. Here's something else I have to think about. And every single molecule in your body is yelling, if you just do a shot, all this shit will go away. We won't have to think about any of this stuff. You just got to do a shot. You just got to smoke one of these. You just got to sniff this. All of this will go away. I've told this story a million times. I used to get addicted to pain meds every ski season. And at the end of ski season, I'd kick because I was too stupid to know I was addicted. So I would just get sick and I'd be like, damn, man, it was a terrible cold. It would last a week. I was miserable. Couldn't get out of bed, threw up. I was dope sick. But I was too dumb to know I was dope sick. But the first time that sickness came on and I knew there was a friggin' cure in it and all I had to do was make a phone call, it became a very difficult thing. All of a sudden, it was almost impossible to try to get off. How do you feel about ketamine? I hate to use, any use of it. Seeing disassociation looks scary. I have abused ketamine during certain times in my life. It's a frightening drug. It's an analog of PCP, right? Yee. It's a rugged drug. It's not a good drug. Caught up with you yesterday. Great song. Anything from Bob Seger, you got me. I'm a huge Bob Seger fan. I'm not a fan of ketamine. I understand that they're trying to do great stuff with it. I understand that that shows a lot of promise with people coming back from battle. It shows a lot of promise for women that have been through really traumatic rapes. I think that that's fantastic, and I hope that that works out. I think it is a terrible drug because of it is so easily abused. Matthew Perry's death is the perfect example of what everything was going perfect, right? He got on ketamine therapy. He said, this fixes everything. Here's my thing. Give drugs to an addict. You know, the first thing they're going to tell you, this fixes everything. That's why they call it needing a fix. He and I shared the same addictions. I couldn't do ketamine because of how close ketamine is. In the right amounts, it's a painkiller. In the right amounts, that stuff is a rowdy painkiller. It's also used as anesthesia. And in the right amounts, it mirrors so much of what heroin does. I can't fart around with it. It's not something I could ever do ever again. And if you take too much of it, it's horrifying. The K-hole effect, where you feel like you're at the bottom of a well and your vision goes like this and tunnels in and everything around it is black, is one of the worst experiences in the drug world, as far as I'm concerned. And people will send me emails tonight and be like, you're kidding, dude. I love K-hole. God bless you. God bless you. You probably like smoking salvia, too. Ugly stuff. Would ketamine ever be given to someone with a severe head injury? That's an interesting question. I don't think any drug should be given to somebody with a severe head injury unless you're doing it through a doctor and they're giving you something for very specific reasons. But I have a brain injury, and I'm not safe to give anything to. I'm just not anything psychoactive at this point in my life. It's just I can't play with my brain chemistry that way. Doesn't matter though, because I've never been happier in my life. I've never made less money ever. But I've never been happier in my life. And I have a feeling that everything is going to just work itself out, people. I really do. You know what I do want from you, though? You can help. Pray for the guys at that place. If you're not someone that prays, then give them a thought, right? Do whatever it is you do. But throw some ones for these guys. Because the fact that they get up every day and fight for sobriety, it makes me embarrassed to not be one of them. For real. I never fought for it the way they're fighting for it now. And they do it with a smile on their face. They're an inspiration. They truly are. Thank you all for showing up and being so kind. That brings me to the 1 hour mark. And as a public speaker, that means I got to bail. If I go longer than that, I feel like I can hear my old boss going, hey, you're long-winded. I love you guys. Between now and tomorrow morning, put a little love in your heart. I'm Tommy. God bless. Good night. Or not.